Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. This episode is one people have been looking forward to for a long time, and I've been looking forward to it too. Super exciting to be here in Minecraft 1.19 and going out to find the Deep Dark. And we're going to find the Deep Dark biome today. I don't know for certain if we are going to discover an ancient city structure, because those are two separate things. But we're going to start by at least trying to find the biome itself, discussing what we can find there and what is left to find if we do not find an ancient city. And then, if we find an ancient city in today's episode, I might not even explore it, because I feel like those are worth an episode all to themselves. And frankly, I need to work up the courage. So I'm going to grab all of the stuff that I need. I'm going to grab my ender chest here, just so I've got a backup, because I've already got one in my inventory. We're going to grab a few snowballs from the chest over here where I've been storing all of the snow stuff. And I don't get these all that often, because I usually roll with a Silk Touch shovel, but I think it's going to be a good idea to take some projectiles with us. For now, all of my mangrove wood is stashed in one of the other chests up there. I've got the mangrove boat with me so that we can bring that with us. I'm going to throw the bone meal back in here because we won't need that. But what I do need is a Silk Touch hoe. So we're going to be keeping this from the mangrove wood episode yesterday, and we're going to be taking that to the Deep Dark with us. And I think that will do. So we're going to kick off by just flying around a little bit and looking for cave entrances that I haven't explored previously, because as with the previous episode, as with the mangrove swamp biome episode, we're going to need to find a place that we haven't had loaded into the world already so that new terrain can generate. And we did trim some chunks, so it's likely that we'd find that closer to spawn than you might expect, but we are going to have to look a little further afield, I think, to find the Deep Dark. Now, as far as I'm aware, there aren't any correlations between the biomes that you find on the surface and whether or not there is Deep Dark below. Apparently, some people have had more luck finding them underneath mountain biomes, but correlation is not necessarily causation in this case, and I'm not certain if there is any data that supports that the Deep Dark can be found in specific places. If there is, and you have a source for it, do let me know, because it'd be really interesting to see that. None of this information is on the Minecraft wiki yet at this point, so it's always good to know the facts about this stuff. But either way, the Deep Dark isn't going to be something that we can super easily spot from the surface. And while it's supposed to be a relatively infrequent biome, I expect it's not going to be as difficult to find the Deep Dark as it was to find a mangrove swamp, because if the conditions where it spawns can be pretty much anywhere, we are more likely to find it in a random cave, because it's one of only 4 environments that can generate 3 biomes, and then the default cave structure that you get if it doesn't generate a lush cave, a dripstone cave, or the Deep Dark underneath it. So chances are, when we're looking down into a cave like this, we might spot patches of the Deep Dark here a little bit more easily than if we're looking for a mangrove swamp biome on the surface, which can have, 40 plus biomes. One thing's for certain though, we are going to need to go deeper in the world, and we've found some. Incredible. Okay, so that is quite the view, my friends. That is, whoa, okay, we have some water. I should probably block this water off, actually. I don't really want the water to be heading on down there. And I'm excited enough about our trip to the Deep Dark today that I'm probably going to ignore stuff like emerald ore when I see it, even though I can't help myself. I might Silk Touch a couple of blocks here and there. But the Deep Dark is going to be a biome you will more commonly find in the deep slate layers of the world. So chances are, if you want to go looking for the Deep Dark and you want a guarantee of finding it, then you should probably just dig around in the deep slate layers of the world, maybe dig in a straight line for a while and see if you bump into one of these. But honestly, I think it's going to be easiest to find it in environments like this. And what a cave, can I just say? This leads from a mountain peak all the way down to deep slate levels. There's a Deep Dark at the bottom of it, and this massive abandoned mine shaft hanging from the ceiling in the cave around it. There is also, if we take a quick look over there, I'm going to grab my spyglass so that we can look in. That right there is an ancient city structure, which seems to be generating on the edge of this section of Deep Dark, which means we might be diving right into the heart of an ancient city if I hop down there. At least we know where that is, but for the most part, the Deep Dark biome around the outside seems to be largely organic. It's not something that is part of the structure, and that's a good thing, because the structure is the area where it is more likely for the Warden to spawn, although judging by what I can see down there, it is certainly not an impossibility. Now I'm going to take the coordinates real quick, and I'm going to head back home, because there are a couple of things that I've forgotten to bring with me that are going to be essential for raiding the Deep Dark. At least now we know where it is. So exploration phase over, now we enter the planning phase. And step 1 of the planning phase is to make sure that I have a bed with me, because I might need to set my spawn point over there. You never know, we could end up in a pickle pretty quickly. But stage 2 of the planning phase is to bring some wool with us. Now we're going to be dealing with an environment where there are a couple of creatures, or blocks in some cases, which can sense your movement. They can sense footsteps and vibrations around them. And the only thing that blocks that, the only thing that occludes those sounds, is wool. Now, we're going to bring a specific couple of colors of wool because, of course, if we end up placing something that is black or grey or cyan even, it's going to blend in with a lot of the environment of the Deep Dark. So what I'm thinking is we're going to bring 2 different colors of wool with us. We're going to bring probably some of the brightest and most standout colors for that environment, which I'm thinking are going to be lime green and probably red. And yeah, of course, we've got a barrel expanding the sheep farm now, so all of the wool is going to be down there. And of course, using these 2 colors, we can also adopt a kind of red light, green light approach to marking where stuff is around there. Red for danger, meaning that, you know, the ancient city is nearby. There's a lot of Skulk Shriekers around, and we'll get to what those are in a second. And maybe green can be for some of the safer areas. That seems like a sensible system. At the very least, we'll have a lot of wool that we can use to occlude the sound of our footsteps. We're going to avoid being heard by walking on wool where our footsteps are not going to be detected by what's down there. And the final stage of the planning phase is going to be to come out here, trade with villagers a little bit, and buy some more food. Not least because I'm running low on the golden carrots that I've stashed in other parts of the world, but also so I can get a bit of quick XP and repair my elytra, which was still looking a little bit beaten up from yesterday. But with all that taken care of, let's return to those mountains north of the Guardian farm, and let's take our first dip into the Deep Dark. Well, it looks like there may actually be more than one reason to return to this area, because I spotted a little blue creature inside one of the cages outside this pillager outpost, and it looks like the pillagers have captured a couple of allays. Now, we're going to talk about those in a separate episode. I much so want to rescue them right now. I don't want to get distracted by some of the stuff that's going on in this episode, and the Deep Dark is our main quest. But we'll be coming back to this spot. I've saved the coordinates. I know where this is, and we're going to return to this to grab the allays in a future episode. So hang in there, buddies. We'll be back for you. But of course, the focus of today's episode lies inside this mountain crater, and we need to swoop down here and make sure we stop somewhere kind of sensible, take out any of the other mobs around here, and much to my dismay, we are going to have to ignore the emerald ore and get serious here. Let's hop on down to, I think, the abandoned mineshaft level of this area, because from there on down, things are going to get a little bit dicey for us if we are not cautious about where we land, and flying down here with elytra may even be a bit of a concern. So let's hop down to where those rails are, right on the edge there, and it looks like there may be some structures over that way as well. So we have to be careful not to wander into the ancient city if we don't want to go there yet. But oh, there is some up here in the ceiling as well even. This biome really starts to get overtaken by the Skulk Blocks, which is what all of these mysterious glowy blocks in the walls are. Now, this ancient city actually travels for a while underneath this, and there it is. We have stepped into the Deep Dark for the first time, and I'm so glad that that noise happened up here and not down there, because that would have frightened me so badly. We got adventuring time for, once again, re-exploring all of the biomes of the world. We got the mangrove swamp yesterday, we just got the Deep Dark biome for the first time today. And while it looks like the city is further down there, I believe the cities only start to generate at a certain height of the world, meaning that if we stay above that, we should stay above the city itself, and we shouldn't end up exploring too much of that without wanting to. Now, I'm going to have to boost the gamma for a lot of this, because these biomes are deep and they are dark, but I'm going to try my best to make them a little bit more visible for you, and I think we need to find a place to touch down in here. Now, the things we want to stay away from are those ones with the rotating portal-like texture in the top and the 4 spikes around the edges. Those are Skulk Shriekers, and they are the Warden's alarm system. The Warden is a new mob, which I'm sure you have heard of if you've been following Minecraft's development at all or seen any of the trailers. The Warden is terrifying. It is a creature that can stalk you based on sound. It's completely blind, and it will hunt you down based on vibrations that you make in the surrounding area, and occasionally, if it can't detect any vibrations, it will stop and sniff for you. So we are going to be hunted by that thing if we trigger these Skulk Shriekers more than 3 times. The 4th time is when they summon the Warden, and the Skulk Sensors around the outside, these kind of wavy little guys here, are the things that will trip the Skulk Shriekers if we're not careful. So we need to be extra careful, and we ideally need to land somewhere that there aren't any sensors or shriekers nearby. So I'm thinking we fly down here very carefully and we stop somewhere towards the back of the cave, and a Skulk Sensor actually just heard me fly past. There's also some gold armor. Hello? That said something about playing a gold armor equip sound in the subtitles. That was really distracting. Is there a zombie spawner right here? Please don't tell me there's a zombie spawner. I cannot think of a worse place for a zombie spawner to be than directly above an ancient city in the deep dark. That would just take the cake. And yet somehow Minecraft has done it. Minecraft has put a zombie spawner directly above an ancient city. Well, that's certainly a thing. The gold armor we heard must have been that baby zombie putting on the gold armor as it spawned in. That is such a weird feature of this, but armor equip sounds have now been updated in Minecraft 1.19 so that the armor actually plays a noise when you equip it, and that includes when a mob spawns in for the first time, which is really kind of cool, actually. Let's take a quick look in the chest here. Oh, no other side disc, but we got a golden apple. That's actually kind of nice. We have multiple copies of Cat and 13, so I'll leave those in here for now. We won't worry too much about them. Anyway, let's get back to exploring the deep dark. I get distracted by this stuff too easily. Now, there are a couple of other zombies spawning in the caves around here, but the deep dark, for the most part, is going to be a mob-free environment. You're not going to find all that many mobs around here, and the reason for that really is because they would create too many vibrations that would trip the Skulk Sensors, and the Warden would be summoned before you really know it. So if we end up lighting up a bit more of this area up here, we can pretty much guarantee we're going to be uninterrupted as we explore the remainder of the deep dark. Now, these are the first thing we're really going to have to be afraid of. Skulk Sensors, if they are near Skulk Shriekers, are our main enemy here. But looking around, if I can get a look at it from a few different angles, it does not look like there is a Skulk Shrieker nearby, meaning it is probably safe for us to approach and deactivate this Skulk Sensor. But I think we should probably do that as cautiously as possible at first, so let's grab a stack of wool and let's start bridging on over to it. Skulk Sensors have a range of 9 blocks, meaning that once we get within a 9-block radius of this thing, it's going to detect us walking if we're walking on anything other than wool or carpet. You can use carpet for this, but as you can see right now, if I step up closer to this thing, crouching and walking on wool, we get the sneak 100 advancement for sneaking near a Skulk Sensor so we do not alert it. Even if I'm not sneaking, even if I'm walking around on wool, it's not going to be a huge problem. But the minute I step off the wool, there we go, we've activated the Skulk Sensor, and it starts and stops clicking, meaning that it will transmit vibrations to anything around it if it has the opportunity. The effective tool for any blocks in the Skulk family is a hoe, but if you want to pick them up, you need to have a Silk Touch hoe on you. There we go, we got ourselves our first Skulk Sensor, and wow, it's weird to be holding one of these in survival. But that looks like the only Skulk Sensor in this little patch here, so we can talk a little bit more about the Skulk Blocks themselves. These blocks are spread throughout the deep dark by Sculk Catalysts. They're the ones that look a little bit like bone blocks with a few extra details and this kind of tablecloth made of Skulk covering the top of it, and they will actually spread the Skulk if mobs die in that area. So these blocks can be made renewably pretty easily. In fact, we could even turn that zombie spawner into some kind of Skulk farm if we wanted to. And there is one of the exciting things, because we can end up using this as a source of experience as well. I'm going to open up my ender chest and grab the other hoe, the fortune hoe, from inside my backup gearbox. Because if we acquire this stuff with a Silk Touch hoe, much like the Skulk Sensor, we're going to pick up the blocks themselves, which I'm quite excited about actually, because I really want to build with these at some stage. But if we use the fortune hoe to mine these up, we actually get experience from that, which could mean we could repair our equipment if we needed to, but it might also be a really neat source of early game experience if you're brave enough to come down here and take a bunch of Skulk from the environment. Right now in this world with an XP farm like my Enderman farm, I'm not really that worried about getting XP from the Skulk. It might be useful to repair our stuff once we're down here, but really, I just want to grab as much of these blocks as possible. So I'm going to throw a couple of things in here for the minute. I'm going to put my fortune hoe back in there and just hold the Silk Touch one, and we're going to claim as much of the Skulk blocks here as possible and stuff them all into a shulker box. Of course, as we grab more of this, we do have to be aware of the location of any more Skulk Sensors or potentially nearby Skulk Shriekers. We do have one over there, so if we got too close to that, we risk tripping it and potentially getting our first strike towards summoning the Warden. And this is a situation that can end up being kind of tricky for us, because there is a Skulk Shrieker right there and one right there, with two sensors very close by each other. So I'm going to head over here walking on a wool bridge so they do not hear my footsteps. I'm going to pop down a torch there a little bit further away from the Skulk Sensor. I'm trying to figure out what the best case scenario is here, but let's try breaking this Shrieker. Yep, there we go, and the Skulk Sensor got tripped, but it didn't trip the one over there. Okay, that's perfect. So that is actually what we wanted to happen. We can safely go over there and disable that Skulk Shrieker if we want to avoid summoning the Warden. We could even, if we're careful, there we go, hop over there using wool. Now, the problem is we want to avoid placing the wool directly on the Skulk Blocks, because that is something that I believe the Skulk Sensors can hear. If we place something there... Oh, okay, that doesn't happen anymore. Maybe next to the Skulk Blocks there? No, okay, cool. So they've changed that. In the snapshots for this, in the in-development versions of the game, if you placed wool on Skulk, the Skulk Sensors could still detect the vibration, which made navigation down here more difficult. But it's very good to know that we can place some wool around these without worrying about disturbing them, which is going to be vital for sneaking around this place. Now we can break this other Shrieker, and even though it tripped a couple of the sensors in the neighborhood, there are no Shriekers to set off, no alarm system for the Warden to detect us. And we can go and pick up some of the Skulk Sensors and the dropped Shriekers as well, because I think they're going to be cool for decoration, and the Skulk Sensors have so many redstone capabilities. It is frankly absurd. And now I can finally start lighting the place up a little bit, because it seems like there aren't too many Shriekers around at this point. We do need to make sure that they aren't hiding in the occasional crevices around here, though, so the wool isn't going to be a necessity all the time. You can sneak around these Skulk Sensors, but as soon as you let go of sneak, they're going to start detecting you, so it's something you need to be aware of. And finally, we get near a Skulk Catalyst. Now, I actually want to demonstrate what the Skulk Catalysts do right here, so I'm thinking what we might end up doing is breaking one of these with a hoe, going back to that dungeon, and seeing if we can spread the Skulk inside of there. It's actually pretty fortunate that we found a dungeon in here if we wanted to demonstrate these mechanics. So let's take care of some of the blocks around here. Let's put a Skulk Catalyst down in the corner right there, and let's eliminate some of the light sources in here so that we start to get some zombie spawns. There we go, we got one zombie. Now let's kill the zombie near the Skulk Catalyst, and it spreads. That's very exciting. Although it hasn't spread and destroyed any of the blocks around here. It hasn't converted too many of them to Skulk. In fact, the only one it has was up here on the ceiling. It has spread a lot of the Skulk vein, this kind of glow lichen-like thing that sticks to every surface but doesn't convert the blocks entirely. It just kind of covers them and coats them like so. The deep slate up here is the one it's converted, and it's left the cobblestone and the mossy cobblestone alone. So what that indicates is that Skulk blocks only end up getting converted from the same types of blocks that would be converted into moss if we spread moss near them. So things like dirt and stone and deep slate are all viable, but things like cobblestone, player crafted blocks typically, and sand and some of the stuff that isn't renewable in the world isn't going to turn into Skulk blocks. It's just going to have the Skulk vein spread on it. This will be important to know in future if we want to generate large amounts of this stuff, because we're probably going to have to do that with a stone generator and not a cobblestone generator, for example. There's a couple of nuances to this that I think are really important. But now we have ourselves a bunch of Skulk Sensors, a couple of Skulk Shriekers, and a Skulk Catalyst. Very cool. Now let's go and reclaim some of that wool, and we can venture slightly further into the biome. I think one of the weirdest things about exploring the Deep Dark so far is that you are fighting against instinct. You want to place torches regularly so that you can light up the environment around you. Not necessarily to prevent mob spawns, because there are no mob spawns around here. It's really just so that you can see. And I kind of want to do that for the sake of you folks watching at home, but I am a little bit reticent to place too many torches down when there are this many Skulk Sensors around, because it is a vibration that they can detect. So once again, apologies if the footage might get a little dark here and there. I am trying my best to play it safe for now, and we'll try and get a little bit more reckless with it in future episodes. For now, though, there are a couple more sensors and catalysts up here. I'm not seeing any Shriekers. I'm checking around every corner for them, but it looks likely that we can hop right in here, pop down a torch or two, and take out the catalysts and the sensors. One thing's for sure, I'm going to have to add a couple of slices to my storage system for these blocks, because I kind of like having them around. I'm not sure what we're going to do with them yet, but we're definitely going to be doing some building with Skulk. As far as where the other Shriekers are in this environment, I'm only seeing one, and it's over there behind that pillar, absolutely surrounded by Skulk Sensors. So I think we might be able to do something about that, but beyond that one, I'm not really seeing many others. I kind of want to show you folks what happens when we get too close to a Skulk Shrieker with some sensors around it and we end up tripping it. So let's see if we can pass the signal on from these sensors over here. No, it doesn't look like they're quite close enough. We will have to get a little closer. Maybe this one? Maybe that one. Ah, there it is. Okay, and this is why we needed to be careful. Because the Warden approaches if we do that too often. Yeah, we end up with this rolling darkness effect, which doesn't show up as a potions HUD effect in the top right-hand corner, but we do have a status effect called darkness, and that pulses this wave of darkness that rolls in and is meant to signify that you are stepping into danger and that the Warden is on its way. Now, if we hop between wall blocks here, we should be able to get a little bit closer to that Shrieker, because I don't know if we really want to see the Warden today. I think we might save that for our Ancient Cities episode. But the goal here is just going to be to pop off that Shrieker. Don't believe there is another one around here, so looks like we should be safe. Man, the amount of sensors we are activating here is slightly absurd. But yeah, it seems like at this point it is safe to go around and grab all of the Skulk Sensors, which we're going to need a fair amount of because, once again, they have so many cool redstone uses. Conveniently enough, you can watch the particles of a vibration move through the air and make contact with the Skulk Sensor. So if you're quick enough, you can actually tell which direction the Skulk Sensor is detecting you from, and that leads you to the sensor if you want to harvest it and take it back to your base. But I'm going to sneak over here just to make sure that there aren't any more Shriekers hiding around the corner. I think one of the riskiest ways that this could generate is if there's a Shrieker just in like a pocket of terrain somewhere nearby that you cannot see, or maybe even through a wall, because I believe the Skulk Sensors can transmit those vibrations through walls. It's also worth noting that they do have a cooldown, so you can move around a little bit. Once you've activated a Skulk Sensor, then you can just try and run up to it and disable it quickly before it vibrates a second time, but that may still be one time too many. And you hear this? You hear this? If I walk over here, I'm actually activating some Skulk Sensors which are behind the wall. You can see very briefly the vibration particle flickers in that direction, and if I break through the wall over here, yes, we find ourselves in a concealed part of the cavern which has a ton of Skulk Sensors in it. And I don't know what the requirements are for generating Skulk Shriekers, but there could very easily be a Shrieker in the middle of this setup which would activate based on all of the Skulk Sensors going off around it. And so that's just reason to be cautious. If you want to be down here, you want to be collecting all of these blocks, but you don't want to be detected that way, probably best to keep your wits about you and make sure that you listen out for any sounds in the surrounding area. And that shocked me there. That was a bit of a jump scare. Thankfully, environmental sound like weather and thunder and that kind of stuff doesn't tend to count as a vibration. Otherwise, I feel like the entire Deep Dark would light up every time thunder rolled outside, but no, I don't think it really works like that. Certainly adds to the overall atmosphere, though, and yeah, there are a couple of kind of cave shafts down here that are leading closer and closer to the structure of the ancient city below. But I'm not quite ready for that yet. Even though there are loot chests very, very close by, there are also a lot more Shriekers that generate in this area, and for good reason. Look at that. If you look down there, there's like two in close proximity to each other and a ton of sensors nearby. So I'm pretty sure you could not take one without tripping the other, and that is really the trap of some of these areas in the Deep Dark. You'll notice even that there are a couple of Skulk Sensors up there being triggered by a bat flying around nearby, and I don't know if the bat would be enough to trip the Skulk Shrieker, but it's certainly enough to trigger the sensors. So that's something else you need to be aware of if you've accidentally brought some mobs in from the cave environments nearby. If a zombie has followed you or a skeleton is still shooting arrows at you, that's something that you'll need to be aware of, and probably eliminate stuff like that. Any potential threats or anything that could create sound and vibrations, you need to avoid if you can possibly help it. At this point, though, we have 56 Skulk Sensors, a decent amount of Skulk Shriekers, and some Skulk Catalysts without really running into too much trouble. So the Deep Dark overall is a biome that we can be relatively safe in if you know the tricks. And trick number one is to walk around on wool as much as possible if you're entering an area where you can see a Skulk Shrieker. Maintain some of that situational environmental awareness and you should be fine. And we've managed to clear out this, more or less this entire plateau of sensors, Shriekers, a couple of catalysts, basically anything that risks doing us any harm. And you'll notice that what we're left with, even in environments over here where it's completely dark, is a totally mob-proof environment. And this is one of the major selling points, I think, for me, of the Deep Dark, because obviously as players we tend to look for environments which we can spawn-proof easily in order to either make mob farms nearby or just have a quiet place where you can build something. And if you're looking for a cave base where you're not going to be harassed by slimes and other mobs pretty much constantly, I think the Deep Dark is that for you. Once you've done a bit of clearing out, of course, once you have cleared out the old inhabitants and made way for something new, you can potentially make a really cool base here without having to worry about the lighting situation at all. Now, while it's true that the changes to mob spawning in Minecraft 1.18 have obviously led to a little bit more atmospheric lighting being possible in builds, I think it's still kind of nice to have an environment like this that you can keep the atmosphere of the cave and keep that kind of creepy, eerie feeling, or at least, you know, build in some kind of subterranean dark environment if you want to, without having to do a ton of spawn proofing. The only mob you need to worry about down here in the Deep Dark really is the Warden. And the Warden is only going to be spawned in by tripping naturally generated Skulk Shriekers, meaning that if we place down one of those Skulk Shriekers on our own, if we put them on the surface, if we take them somewhere else, they're not going to spawn the Warden there. And to demonstrate that, we're going to take some of the Shriekers and other components back to our base, and we're going to try and spawn the Warden on the surface, because I'm pretty sure it won't really be possible to do that. But right over here, we have one of our dilemmas. This is the area that could be a serious problem, because right there, see, we have a Skulk Shrieker. I'll try my best to illuminate the footage so it's a little easier to see, but there you go. Skulk Shrieker right there, potentially going to cause chaos with all of the sensors around it. And up there in the ceiling, we have another Shrieker, not too far away from it, and potentially within range for all of these Skulk Sensors to trip one when we eliminate the other. So what are we going to do about that? Well, first of all, I'm going to trip one of them, because I didn't realize that placing a torch there was within range of the Skulk Sensor. That is strike 2. We are 2 points away from the Warden being summoned. But then what I'm going to do is very carefully make my way in here, bridging over wool. And gosh, I'm so happy that wool doesn't trip Skulk Sensors if you place it on top of the Skulk anymore. But then what I'm going to do is place some wool blocks in between these sets of Skulk Sensors. The ones that are closest to tripping that Skulk Shrieker up there, I'm basically going to place some wool in between these two sets of Skulk Sensors. And now, hopefully, when I eliminate this Skulk Shrieker, there we go. You'll notice that these didn't pass on the vibrations to the ones next door, because wool not only prevents players from being heard walking around near Skulk Sensors, but it actually prevents Skulk Sensors from hearing stuff that's on the other side of the wool. It occludes the sounds that they can hear, meaning that if we put a torch over on this side, as you saw, we can light up all of these sensors, but not the ones on the other side, even though that should be something that they can hear. It's all about how vibrations travel, and the wool muffles those vibrations. What that means is we can come up here, once again pillaring up with some wool. We can probably do a quick check around to make sure that there are no Skulk Shriekers around the outside that are going to be tripped by... Oh yeah, there's 2. In fact, there are 3. There are 3 Skulk Shriekers right next to each other. Well, if we place some wool here, right next to that Skulk Sensor, that one's not going to trip things. We can place some wool there and there, potentially here as well, like so. And now let's see if we trip any of those Skulk Sensors by destroying the Shriekers. Looks like we do. Okay, so that's a problem. That is our 3rd strike. The Warden has advanced. It looks like the signal reached this one diagonally through that Skulk block. So maybe if we put a block there, I'm a little bit concerned about this, but we do want to be careful here. I think if I take this one out, that sensor is going to hear and is going to transmit the signal to that one, at which point we will have to leave pretty quickly because the Warden is going to start spawning in. But I kind of want to know. I kind of want to know what's going to happen here. Yep, there it is. Okay, right, we're going to grab all of these and we are going to run because the Warden is coming and I am scared of that. Wait a second. I think we're okay. I think we're okay. Maybe, and this is only a theory, so I'm not entirely confident about that, but maybe we lost one of the strikes that we had earlier because it took place a while ago. I know that there is a time limit. I just don't have all of this stuff memorized about the Skulk stuff yet. So I'm thinking that maybe one of our strikes from earlier wore off as we were eliminating some of the other Skulk Shriekers from around the environment, and so maybe the Warden isn't going to appear quite yet. We've been quiet enough for a long enough period of time. Gosh, that was tense though. That was really, really tense. So the lesson here is that while wool can occlude Skulk Sensors, while it can block vibrations from getting to them, the direction that the vibration travels is really important, and if the wool isn't enough to occlude a diagonal vibration like that, then it's still going to end up tripping the Skulk Sensor. So that is something we've learned, and that is some learning that we can apply to our trip to the ancient city tomorrow. But for now, I think I've had enough excitement for one day. I think we're probably going to head on back to the base, and we can unpack some of this stuff in the full light of day, where the Warden can't arrive and hurt us. I can certainly be happy with the fact that we've got a stack of Skulk Sensors in this box, and we've got enough Sculk Catalysts that we could spread a bit of the Skulk if we wanted to later on. So we'll say adios for now to the deep dark. It is snowing outside. Let's head on home, and let's unpack some of this stuff back at the base. Okay, we're back, and I'm very happy that the only damage I sustained there was banging into the cave walls a couple of times on my way out. So, we have ourselves a bunch of cool stuff from the Deep Dark. We've got the Skulk Catalysts, the Skulk Sensors. I'm going to throw the wool in here for now, just so it's kind of out of the way and my inventory can be a little clearer. We didn't need the snowballs after all, but we're definitely going to need those tomorrow, and we can chuck out a couple of other bits and pieces, and finally, I can hear myself think with an inventory this busy. So first of all, let's talk about the Skulk Sensor and why I'm so excited to have this many of them, because they can be used for a variety of stuff involving redstone. They are effectively going to be player detectors, but not just players. They can be detectors of all kinds of different stuff. And the thing we need to know is how they interact with redstone. Now, first of all, every time a Skulk Sensor hears a sound, or detects a vibration more accurately, it's going to light up with redstone power. But the power that it generates from that is actually proportional to how far away the sound occurred, which is frankly kind of impressive. So for example, if I'm sneaking and I'm a little bit further away and I make some noise over here, the redstone signal strength is going to be a lot less than it would be if I'm making a noise right up close to it and jumping up and down next to the Skulk Sensor right here. Let me give you a quick example. We'll put a redstone lamp 5 blocks away, like here, and you'll notice that placing the block here didn't even light up the Skulk Sensor. Now if I'm moving around nearby once again, the Skulk Sensor didn't even produce enough power to light the redstone lamp. Now if I get a little bit closer, obviously the first time because I'm still walking towards it, it's going to detect me, but now if I jump up and down next to the Skulk Sensor, it easily produces enough power to light up that redstone lamp, and if I'm right on top of this thing, it's going to hear me and output the maximum signal strength of 15, which you can see in the power level right there. In fact, if you stand on top of this thing, it's basically going to act like a redstone clock. It's constantly interfering with these tendrils that are the things that are supposed to detect the vibration. So if we want a kind of slow redstone clock, or effectively like a pressure plate that pulses multiple times once we're standing on it, all you really need to do is stand on top of a Skulk Sensor, and the sensor will do the rest for you. And just kind of counting it in my head, I think it's happening roughly every 2 seconds, or every 40 game ticks, so that's actually pretty cool. That's a neat way of having a slow-ish, but still relatively fast redstone clock. Slow compared to like an observer clock, for example, but still relatively fast in the grand scheme of things. And you'll notice that the Skulk Sensor will do this even if you sneak up on top of it, so it's worth bearing that in mind. It will also detect us opening the shulker box nearby, but once again, it won't detect if we place wool around it. So in situations where you would want to use Skulk Sensors heavily in redstone contraptions, it's going to be necessary to incorporate a bit of wool in the design so that you don't end up walking around this thing and tripping it. It's also, quite significantly, producing weak power on all 4 sides, and presumably no power on the top, which kind of makes it similar to activated redstone dust in a way. I am kind of curious, though, if it provides strong power to the block it's sat on. I imagine that it would. No, it doesn't seem to, because if it was strongly powering this block of wool, then presumably that redstone line there would be lighting up. And I don't think that's anything to do with the material. I don't think Skulk Sensors just can't transmit redstone power to wool. I think it's just weakly powering everything, which means that this block isn't receiving and then transmitting any redstone power. The power is not traveling through it. If we put some redstone dust there, however, it is. And that's kind of useful as well, because it means that the Skulk Sensor is not going to automatically power any of the other components around it, especially if you need to occlude it with wool. So it's not going to interfere with too much of the other redstone circuitry. So it'll only really interact with other redstone components. Now, of course, if we wanted to, let's say, always have the Skulk Sensor output the same power, and we didn't want to worry too much about the distance away, all you need to do is put a redstone repeater there, and it'll output a signal strength of 15 every single time, regardless of how far away you are when the vibrations occur. But the real power comes in when we start to detect this using a comparator, because if we put a comparator down right here, it's actually going to produce a different signal strength depending on the sound it hears, not the distance away that the sound occurs. Our footsteps occurring nearby are only going to produce a signal strength of 1 from the comparator right here, whereas if we place a block nearby, for example, that's going to output a different redstone signal strength. That's going to output a signal strength of 12. Okay, wow. Interestingly, a player's footsteps just kind of casually walking around like this, and a player landing from a jump produces a different signal strength. So if you wanted to, you could have some kind of automatic door that only activates when you jump nearby, and when you're walking around nearby and all it is are your footsteps, then it's not going to matter all that much. Another really interesting thing is that placing a block produces a signal strength of 12, which as you see was not enough to light up this redstone lamp, but breaking a block produces a signal strength of 13, so that was enough to light the redstone lamp. And you can imagine the amount of weird combination locks you can make that are based on player actions instead of just interacting with something. You could have, say for example, something that requires you to jump up and down 3 times and then place and break a block, and that could open the door to a secret base. If you know what you're doing with Skulk Sensors, if you have the know-how to program all of this stuff in. And of course, all of this is based on the range at which the Skulk Sensor can hear you, so it has to happen within 9 blocks for it to detect any of this happening, and you can occlude that with wool, meaning that it couldn't happen on 3 of the 4 sides, or even that it would have to happen directly overhead of the Skulk Sensor, and that stuff is fascinating to me. I think we could do so much with this. And a Skulk Sensor can't typically detect another Skulk Sensor activating. So, for example, if I walk around near this one, it's not going to activate that one. That one isn't going to hear this one lighting up and go, oh, okay, I should light up as well. But they can interact with redstone components that allow them to do just that. So, for example, let's say I walk around near this one. The Skulk Sensor provides weak power to that note block, which is enough to play it, and the note block activates the next Skulk Sensor in the chain. And that is really quite cool, because that means we could just create noisemakers that propel a redstone signal down the line. And effectively what you have at that point is wireless redstone. Skulk Sensors also don't seem to be bothered by the rain. As we saw in that cave, thunder doesn't trip them, but yeah, the rain doesn't either. We've just got to be careful to make sure that we silk touch the Skulk Sensors every single time, because if you break them with anything else, you're just going to get XP. Now that the rain is gone, let's return to the Skulk Shrieker. And this thing is not going to sense you in the same way the Skulk Sensor does. In fact, it relies on the Skulk Sensor to transmit the vibrations to it in order to detect anything happening at all, unless you step on it directly. If we walk up onto this thing, it'll make that same shriek that it did whilst we were down there in the deep dark, but you'll notice nothing else really happens, because we have taken this and placed it elsewhere. Once we've removed it from the environment in which it generated, in fact, once we've removed it from the spot in which it generated, it no longer counts as the kind of Skulk Shrieker that can summon the Warden. And that also means it doesn't produce the darkness status effect that we get down there, which is going to be an interesting challenge for certain advancements. Things like the How Did We Get Here advancement, which is going to require players to have every status effect in the game. Darkness is included in that, and some folks who've already been speedrunning the game to acquire every status effect in 1.19 have found that potentially the best way of getting hold of that darkness status effect is not going to be from a Skulk Shrieker, it's going to be from the Warden itself. You're probably going to have to name tag a Warden so it stays persistent, make sure it is trapped somewhere, and that it can constantly give you the darkness effect when you're nearby, but is not going to arrive and kill you. But nothing more really needs to be said about the Skulk Shrieker. It's a noisemaker. It doesn't really do a whole lot else. As you can see, its Skulk Sensors will trip it, but it doesn't produce any kind of redstone signal or anything like that, and that doesn't lead to the Warden or the darkness effect occurring in the overworld either. So they're cool for the decoration, and they're cool for the sounds that they make. If you want to have some atmospheric effects in like a haunted house build or something like that, you can do that, but really, the Skulk Shrieker is not going to provide all that much if you take it out of the environment of the deep dark. Now, the Sculk Catalyst is a really interesting one, and for that, I think we need a couple of mobs to experiment on, so I'm going to bring over some cows. Very glad that after all this time, I've still kept a cow farm over there behind my house. So if we kill a cow near the Skulk Catalyst, as you can see, it pretty much instantly picks up this sort of soul effect, and instead of the cow dropping XP, that XP is channeled into the Sculk Catalyst, and it starts to look around for areas that it can convert into Skulk, which it's done very easily here with a couple of grass blocks, but it's spread some Skulk vein around the outside because the cow didn't drop all that much XP, so it wasn't really quite powerful enough to have spread the Skulk any further than this. If we bring another cow over and we kill it on a neighboring block, yeah, it kind of does the same thing. In fact, that might have converted the block underneath. No, it didn't. Okay, interesting. So maybe it avoids converting the blocks directly underneath the Sculk Catalyst, or maybe there just wasn't enough XP to really make that happen. But here's the important question. If we kill a cow by environmental means, and maybe we should break the rest of this just so that we can be absolutely sure that the cow is producing new Skulk if it ends up getting killed this way. If the cow dies through means which are not actively the player killing it, and circumstances in which it would not drop XP, does it still spread the Skulk? And the answer seems to be that yes, it does. This is the most important aspect of the Skulk Catalyst thing, because it means that you can then break the Skulk and claim XP from that, meaning that we can effectively set up a passively accumulated XP farm that does not require players to kill the mobs, but does produce XP from them having died. And naturally, there are going to be limits to how far the Skulk can spread, right? It also seems to only spread to surface layer blocks. I'm not certain if it's going to take over blocks below this. Certainly moss doesn't behave that way. Moss would end up spreading to the surface, but not taking over any of the blocks immediately below surface blocks. It has to be an empty block above for the Skulk to spread to it, I would assume. So in order to generate a renewable supply of Skulk for XP farming, one would have to create a stone generator that was constantly generating new stone for the Skulk to spread to, and moving the Skulk blocks out to a separate containment area where they could be stored and harvested later for the XP. But the fact is, we can use these new Skulk Catalysts as a way to set up long-term storage for XP at XP farms. And while it's nothing too revolutionary in terms of XP, I think it's a fascinating mechanic, and one that I'm sure we will end up exploring in future episodes. For now, though, I need to make sure I've got the right hoe on me, because I need to make sure I can pick this up without the Skulk Catalyst turning into XP itself. But either way, that is where we're going to leave this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. We will have to explore the Deep Dark a little more in future episodes, and the Ancient City episode, I think, is probably going to be tomorrow. So stay tuned for potentially our first brush with the Warden, but hopefully some really interesting loot that we can find down there, and one of the coolest environments to come to Minecraft in a very long time. Well, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.